Hello everyone, and now we're talking about research skills. So once you know what your project will investigate, how do you find out about that subject, and how do you find out good information about that subject? Well, the first piece of advice I can give you is to get started now. Begin your research as soon as you decide what subject you will use. Many students think that they can just do a quick internet search and everything they need will be there. They can find it right away. But this is not always true. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. When you begin searching, you might find nothing on your topic, but you might also find thousands of articles, and how do you know which is the right one? Finding the right information does take some time. So the cycle of research, what is this? Well, research cannot be done in a single day. You will find that research is a cycle. You will find information, and this might give you new questions that you need to answer, and so you need to review and look again at the subject, maybe go back to some other articles. So it's about getting information and also understanding that information. And then that will lead you to ask questions and search for those answers. And search is of course part of research. So you ask questions, you begin with your very first question or your hypothesis, you search for answers, you get information, and then you have to read through and understand that information. And if you don't understand it, then you will need to ask or pose new questions. And then you'll go around again, searching for the answers to those questions and then getting information about it, and then maybe coming up with new questions to look for information about the answers. And you keep researching and asking questions until you are sure, or fairly sure, that you have all the information you need to do your project properly. And that's up to you to decide. Sources. So, where do you get your information from? Here we have a man who tested this himself yesterday, and his friend who read it on the internet last month. Who do you trust to give you good information about a subject? I don't know about you, but I'm going with the guy on the left. So, a source is where your research comes from. The person or the company that got the information that you're using for research. It's important to be sure that your sources are reliable. So good sources make it easier to build good research, and the best sources can almost answer all your questions for you if your research is quite simple. So what is good research? And if you get a good source, how do you know that their research is good for your project? So there is a huge amount of information on the internet, far more than you ever need for research. How do you find it? There are 5 things that you can think about to judge a piece of research, and you do the best job you can about judging these 5 things. So there's authority, accuracy, objectivity, currency, and relevance. So for authority, is your source an expert? This is good. Or are they an amateur? They don't really know what they're talking about, which is not so good. Accuracy. Are they right or are they wrong? This is something that you can only really decide by looking at many sources and seeing who says what and how many people agree and how many people disagree with each other. So objectivity next. Are they being fair or are they being unfair? And this is difficult to judge sometimes. You have to look for bias. You have to judge whether your source is objective, whether they are looking at only the facts, or whether they are bringing their own opinion in, which would be unfair. Currency. Is it new or is it old? The newer your information is, the less likely that anyone has proved it wrong. So new information is not always more reliable, but it's something to think about. And then relevance, finally. Is it useful for your project? It's sometimes easy to get trapped in reading things which are interesting, but actually aren't useful to your project. So watch out for that as well. So let's just review those quickly. So the first thing you need to think about in your research is your source an expert? Are they an authority? Good information comes from good sources, and good sources know their subject. Is it accurate? Is there good, clear information? Do you understand all of it, and can you check it? The best way to decide if something is accurate is to read other sources and see if they agree, and then choose the best one of all the ones you've read. Is it objective? Or is the information biased? Does it have its own opinion and maybe it's not doing the science fairly? Is it current? Is it up to date? Is it a new piece of information or is it old? And also, does this matter? There are many things that you can read from hundreds of years ago that are still true today, but there are many that are not. And finally, relevance. Does the information cover or include everything you need to know, and will it help you, or is it just interesting? So how do you do research? Well, it's about reading, obviously, and it's also about web searching in large part. So searching the internet is not hard, but you need to have the right words to type into a search engine. So you need to think about the words you've already found and combine them in searches. You need to try to use as few words as possible. Sometimes it's helpful to just type in a whole question, but quite often the best way to find what you need is to just type the two most important words, or three most important words. And when they come up together, that is a sign that you have an article that might be worth reading. Then if you want to search in a library, sorry, there are still libraries, they still have a lot of information, and sometimes there are things which are only in a paper book and not somewhere on the internet. Yes, I know, it's hard to believe. If you go to a library and you're not sure how to use it, just ask someone to show you how to use the filing system. How do you look for this relevant information? Using your 3 types of reading, you will try to find the most useful articles as quickly as possible. 3 types of reading. What are they? Obviously, there's so much information on the internet, you can never read all of it, even one subject. So you have to find information quickly, and you have to be good at finding it quickly. So this is easier if you know how to use these 3 types of reading: skimming, scanning, and studying. Skimming is getting the basic idea, just reading over the paragraphs quickly and getting a feel of the piece. Scanning is looking for specific information. If you read something and you know it has a fact or detail you need, you can scan looking for something in that detail, like a number or a date or a name. And then of course there's studying, which is exactly what it says. You have to understand everything. You read every word and you understand every sentence. So again, let's review those. Skimming is reading very quickly to get the main points of a piece. If you're skimming, you're hoping to get a rough idea about what the piece of research is about. And scanning is looking through a piece to find a certain bit of information. If you're scanning, then you are trying to find something very specific. And then finally there's studying, reading every word carefully to understand everything. If you're study reading, you want to understand the whole topic. So when you start your research, you will almost always be skimming. Unless you know that you have one very important book you must read, then you will skim many pages quickly to find a good selection. You might want to scan to look for certain details that you know you want. And then once you've got a selection of good pieces, you can study them to understand more. But don't be afraid to throw away a piece of research if you start to study it and you realize actually it's not as useful as you thought it was. So you must take notes so that you know where you've been. Whenever you're doing research, you need to keep a list of where you've been and what you've collected. And this includes websites or references if you're in a paper library, authors who wrote it, which is the source, and the main idea of the article. Why did you record this particular reference? Why did you write this one down? So you take notes and you put the important points of the books and journal articles. Why? Because then at the end, when you write your final report, you know where to find everything again. You are not going to keep your web browser open with all your research until you finish your project and you write your report. So you need a way to go back to the things that you read the first time. References. What are references? Well, they are another word for sources, but they are particularly important when writing science reports. If you accidentally, or deliberately, even worse, pretend that you have written something, then you can get in a lot of trouble. We call it plagiarism, and it is a very, very serious academic crime. In many countries, you can get thrown out of school or college or university if you are found guilty of plagiarism. So when you write your project, you should be very careful to put a list of all your references at the bottom. And we call this a bibliography, or sometimes they just write references. So some sample references that we could look at. You're not going to need to do this for any M3 project, or you should, but you won't be accused of plagiarism if you don't. You're still practicing being a scientist, but you should very much remember that it is extremely important, and try and do it in every science paper that you ever do. So there's a reference from a book, from a magazine, and from an internet report. So all of them show the author or authors, the year that it was written, and then the title. The title of the book or the title of the article. And then you either, for a book, you put the publisher of the book, so the company that published the book. For a magazine, you put the magazine name and the volume or the edition, and also the page number. You can also put in page numbers for a book if you are only looking at a small part of a book. And then for an internet report, you have to put the web address that you found the report at, but you also have to report when you went there, so the day that you accessed it. Why is this? Because web pages can change over time. So if I go back to your reference after 2 months or 3 months, the information might be different. So if it's very important that I check your reference, then I need to be able to go to the company and ask for old versions of the website.